Okay, great. Welcome, everybody. Thank you all for joining us for our MemoryFox webinar today. This April, this is our MemoryFox webinar for April. We have the wonderful Barbara O'Reilly joining us today, and I'm so excited to have her on. We've been talking about this for a while, so this is super duper exciting to have her here. And like I was saying, I love starting promptly, so I'm just going to go ahead and let you all know. Today, we're going to be talking about how to unlock the mystery of donor retention. And I'm sure that's something that a lot of you think about constantly. Like, how do I get these people to come back and donate again? Well, you're in the right place. That's what we're going to talk about today. First, I just want to share a little bit about MemoryFox with you all. We are a technology solution that brings missions to life, and we do that by helping nonprofits collect, organize, and share stories that come directly from your community. And pretty cool thing about us is that to date, we've actually served 350 nonprofits, and we've collected more than 75. Oh, that's not supposed to say 75 plus. It's supposed to say 75,000 plus. That's a big difference. But videos, photos, and written testimonials. And if anybody would like to stick around today at the very end of our presentation, I'll just share a little bit more about MemoryFox. But first, I would love to introduce our guest. So, like I said, this is Barbara O'Reilly. She is the founder and principal of Windmill Hill Consulting, LLC. She has 30 years experience with major gifts, annual fund, and campaign fundraising. And she has assisted major nonprofits like Harvard University. Have you ever heard of it? I know I have. The National Trust of Historic Preservation, Oxford University, and the American Red Cross. Again, those are all huge nonprofits. So really exciting to get your expertise today. And one thing about Barbara, she believes that fundraising is much more than just raising money. It's about enabling donors to realize their philanthropic dreams. And I love that because it's just making it more than just asking for money. So without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and pass over the mic to Barbara.
All right. Thank you, Carly. Welcome, everyone. I am so thrilled to be here today. I'm coming to you from a very rainy Washington, D.C. metro area. But this has been something that I've been looking forward to making my MemoryFox debut. I'm a massive fan of this platform and of the entire team. So really thrilled to be here today, and I'm thrilled that I'm thrilled that they've given me the opportunity to stand on my soapbox for a little bit, because we've got a crisis in our sector, and in our race to raise money to meet budget goals, we sometimes, very often, lose sight of all the other things that go into whether or not we can meet those budget goals. And one of those things is retention. And we know certainly from lots of research that, and by looking at our peers in the for-profit sector, that retention is one of the biggest drivers for sustainability and for success and for growth. So we need to be bringing that mindset into this sector a little bit more than we already are. And I'll explain to you why as we go through these slides. So I really want this to be as much about a conversation with you all. So I'm going to share lots of ideas and sort of resources that underscore this important topic of donor retention. But I want you to be, feel free to put questions in the chat. Carly's keeping a close eye on that. We're going to leave time at the end for Q&A. And so I want you to be able to ask the things that are kind of burning on your mind about donor retention and fundraising. And if you've come to this session and nothing is burning on your mind yet about retention, that's absolutely okay, because this is the place to get a good handle on what you need to be thinking about. So we're going to start at the real meta level of understanding what drives donors, because we have a lot of research and studies now that help us to understand what goes into donor giving decisions. And if we fail to factor that into our strategies and our approaches, we're really setting ourselves up for stagnation and for failure ultimately. So, and which then drives the low donor retention that we have in this sector. So I want to start by getting a little bit geeky and telling you more about the donor drivers. Then I want to get into a little bit of the math. Now, I am absolutely not a math person, so I'm going to give you very simple formulas that you can factor in yourself to understand what your retention rates are. And if you could, put into the chat if you are tracking your own donor retention right now. And so just put like a yes or a no if you are tracking donor retention. I'd love to be able to see where people are in sort of your donor retention journey, if you would. And then finally, we're going to talk about how do you then reverse the trend in your own organization and hopefully then ultimately in the sector to improve that donor retention rate. So with that, I want to start with this big picture of here we go. Big picture of why donors give. So drop into the chat. Why do you think donors give? What motivates them to make contributions to organizations like yours? Personal connection. Yep. Personal connection. Okay, the attract donors, great. Okay, passionate about the mission, asked by someone they know, gives them a sense of being the person they want to be. Nelson, you understand the psychology behind this. Absolutely. Thank you everyone for your feedback. At the highest level, we want to be the very best person we can be. We all want to be striving for our ideal selves. And so at the absolute umbrella level, top umbrella level, giving helps us feel better about who we are, helps us feel more charitable, makes us feel like we're making contributions we're improving our communities, our world around us. And so, yes, that's absolutely one of the drivers. It's just who we are as human beings. It's what we are striving for. So when we take that down to the next level of then the act of making gifts to organizations, those factors of they believe in the mission of the organization, they believe that their gift can make a difference, they have a personal connection to the mission. These are, in all the studies I've seen, these are the top three reasons. So there's a feeling that there's a personal connection, and I guarantee that every time you ask a donor why they give to your organization, there will be some personal story, whether it's from deep in their childhood to something family related to something else that personally connects with them. That will be an important part of their why for giving to you. So we have to remember that giving is a choice. Giving is part of our ultimate self-fulfillment of who we want to ideally be, and we are choosing the organizations that most closely align with what's important to us, the values we bring, and where we think our gifts can make a difference. So when we put it in that sense, gosh, doesn't it feel a lot different than just sending out solicitations and sending out thank you notes to solicitations? It's so much more than that. It's not the transaction that we often and our boards often think it is. There's also, you'll allow me to get a little bit more wonky about this, but there's more that goes into philanthropy and volunteering. So if you look on the left, this big scan here, this is a big brain scan, and on this little inset here, this is your brain on philanthropy. So it's the parts of your brain that are firing up that are the reward centers. So and in this particular instance, the subject was asked questions about who they support and where they volunteer and so forth. And the parts of the brain they're firing up are the parts that make us feel good. They release those hormones that are the social bonding, right? The oxytocin and the endorphins that are released when we are doing the things we like to do or with loved ones, people we enjoy. We're feeling good about who we are as human beings contributing to the world. So it literally changes the chemistry of our brain, and it creates a sense of bonding. So when we think about the language we use, those donors are coming to us because they want to be part of something. They want to be part of our world as an organization. So that sense of they're part of that bigger movement of your donor family, and they're also maybe there's they're not part of something. So for example, if you're, I'm going to just use a random example of a humane or society, right? So you're part of those caring, compassionate supporters who want to ensure that all animals are well cared for and have forever homes. You're also part of that movement against the mistreatment and the abuse of animals, right? So it's that kind of who are you with and who are you against, and those are the things that we're subtly factoring into donor decisions. So it becomes much more than writing that check or making that online contribution. When some other research that was done talks about, and this was done I think out of the University of Notre Dame. A book was written about it called The Paradox of Generosity. If you're interested, it's a really great read. But they looked at donors of all levels to understand a little bit more about kind of the connection between happiness and health and charitable activities, both volunteering and donations. And they found that generally donors and volunteers were more likely to say they were happy. They were more likely to say they felt healthier than their counterparts who were not donors and not volunteers. So there's a real big, often undetected change that happens to donors or volunteers when they are involved, when they're getting involved with an organization that they really support and really care about. So as fundraisers and nonprofit leaders, we have to put that front and center when we think about how we connect with and communicate with our donor audiences, because this is far more than for the gift that they make. And in fact, the first gifts are often just sort of testing the waters to see, is this really the organization that I want to stay with? So that said, if we believe that the giving has all these incredible benefits to our self-worth and our impressions of ourselves and how healthy and happy we feel, it really does truly give us that warm glow. Why do donors stop giving? Because the whole point of today's session is that there's a crisis. And this is one study related to the other chart from around why donors give, but there are a few other studies that have been done, and they all come back to how we communicate with our donors. There are some things on this chart, and this is a little bit dated now, but there are some things that are, not are out of our controls as nonprofits, right? That the person's no longer involved with the organization. Maybe there were changes in the leadership, which maybe the donors or volunteers didn't really agree with. Or maybe there are changes in their philanthropic priorities. Those are things that are out of your control as nonprofit leaders. But what is in your control is how you talk about the work that you do, how you communicate back so that your donors understand that their gifts of every level are making a difference in solving the problem you were set out to solve. So we don't do a good enough job. And I say that not to be a criticism, but it's a fact, because if we did, we'd have a lot more donors sticking around across the sector so that it isn't as low as it is. So 43%, put into the chat what you think 43% means. I'm sure someone must have an idea what 43% means. Only retaining 43%. Yes, exactly. So this, on average, the nonprofits in the US are keeping 43% of their donors on average. Now, the numbers are going to vary wildly for organizations, from organization to organization, but on average, nonprofits are losing about 60% of their donors each and every year. And for first-time donors, it's even worse. It's 80% of first-time donors are not coming back to make a second and third and repeat gifts. That's Just think about that for a second. in the for-profit world, customer obsession, customer loyalty, customer retention are key and core drivers for business. Amazon has customer obsession as one of their top 3 values as a company. In fact, I think it's the top value as a company. So their goal from the very beginning was, how do we get people to make purchases through our platform? How do we keep them? How do we make it so that it's an experience that they will want to come back and repeat over and over again? And so customer obsession, no matter what you may think about Amazon, that customer obsession is first and foremost in everything that they do, in their design of their platform and all the other things. And in fact, all the tools that the platform is completely designed so that it learns about who we are. It will make suggestions based on our our shopping history. It will get to learn what we're buying, at the frequency of that we're buying. It might suggest subscribe and save for certain things that it sees, it detects we're repeat buying. So it's really understanding who we are. It's making it super easy and frictionless, and when we maybe too frictionless in how we buy things. But that point is that from the very first purchase, Amazon is already configured, and many platforms are already configured to say, how do we make sure that that customer comes back? So that's the big headline. But some other donor retention trends we're seeing, which should be the headline on every single Chronicle, philanthropy publication, issue, news, every week. They should be the thing that people are screaming from the mountaintops about. We are losing donors. So it's not just we've got donor retention issues, but the number of donors to nonprofits as a whole has been steadily declining by 20% since 2000. So if we kept on that trajectory, something like by the 2040s, we will have no more donors left to the nonprofit sector. I don't think it's going to get there, but I do put this out here as a really important flag, because it means that donors are looking at lots of other ways that they can be making a difference in the world. And it may not necessarily be to nonprofits or only to nonprofits, right? So we've seen over the last 4 years, especially the donors who are the most likely to disappear were those who gave under $500. And that's generally about more than 90% of donors who give. So the biggest bread and butter segment is disappearing right in front of us. These donors who are giving 500 and above, new donors, they were more likely to be retained than those who were reactivated. So in other words, reactivated donors were people who had been donors, had stopped donating, and then something inspired them again and they made renewed gifts. So interesting, right? That one I still can't get my head around personally, because new donors were more likely to be retained than those who had a history of giving, which to me also signals there's something else that was going on in those donor relationships. But by and large, the people who are most likely to disappear are under $500. I think this tells us that we are, as a sector, getting too starry-eyed about the mega donors, about how do we get Mackenzie Scott money? How do we get the next big grant from whomever? And we're losing sight of our lower end donors. And we do see this in the Giving USA report that shows us that there's a higher concentration of gifts that are coming from large families, couples, individuals. And we are seeing this decline in the smaller end donors. So there's an interesting paradox here, because we know that giving is so meaningful to people, but yet people are now choosing other ways to give besides nonprofits, which means that it's squarely in our court to figure out how we re-engineer this so that we build those deeper connections and keep more donors within our organizations. So if you don't track your donor retention now, that's okay. This is the moment to start. And you really want to think about that retention as a metric to be tracking year over year. Facebook, right? I am not on Facebook, so they are not worrying about trying to retain me, but they do worry about how they can grow the platform, by users of the platform, and how they can keep them coming back, right? To doom scroll endlessly for hours. That's how they know that they're going to be able to monetize and keep profitability for the platform. Um, and we know that there's a correlation. Our for-profit colleagues know this very, very well, that if you can improve donor loyalty or customer loyalty and retention, you can in fact increase your revenue. And my colleague, Adrian Sargent, Dr. Adrian Sargent, has studied this. And in this particular example, he did a little comparison. He wanted to understand if there was an organization that had, let's say, a 41% retention, what would happen if they bumped that to 51%? What they saw was that there was, in fact, a growth of about $450,000 by just tiny, tiny little increments of keeping those donors by 10% each and every year. And what's very interesting to see as well is not only did you would expect if you keep more donors, average gift remains the same. Yes, the math is going to work out so that you are raising more money each year. But what's also interesting, particularly to note, is that the lifetime of those donors extended by 4 years. So in this particular instance, generally those donors stayed around for about 10 years, but with that renewed and more reinvigorated approach to keep more donors, they stayed on for 4 more years longer. So you see that there's a benefit, certainly by able to keep more donors who can give more collectively each and every year and over their lifetime of being with you. Now, not every organization, not every donor is going to stay with their organizations that they support for their, in perpetuity, but we do want to hold on to them as long as we can so that they feel satisfied that they are investing in the right way. So the math to do your donor retention calculations is very easy. So you look at how many donors did you have, let's say in this example, how many you had 1,000 donors in 2021. How many of the same donors in 2022 did you have? And then you divide the one into the other. So in this case, this was a 40% retention, which meant 60% attrition. There are many of the CRMs can calculate this for you quite easily. There's also the fundraising effectiveness project. I think it's called Growth in Giving. There's an Excel spreadsheet that you can download, and it can help you to calculate these numbers as well. Especially because depending on your file size, your donor file size, it may be too hard to, kind of manually compare the donor cohorts from one year to another. But this is generally what you want to be tracking. And I would encourage you to get your baseline of what your retention number is now, both for your overall and then for your first time donor retention. So in this case, you look at the donors that you had who made first time gifts, and then that next year, how many of them made a second gift or multiple gifts after that? And you divide the one into the other. And again, two really important metrics, because if we think about on average, organizations are losing 80% of their first time donors. We have to do everything we can to keep them engaged so that they give that second gift and then they give that third gift. And if we can inspire that second and third gift, they are more likely to stick around and become an ongoing supporter. Now, there's also the factor of lifetime value, right? So we often need to make the case to our boards and our executive leaders that we have to monetize. Well, what difference does it make if we're losing a few donors here and there? Well, we need to be able to quantify that. And so one way to do that is by calculating the lifetime value. This is the formula. No, I'm just kidding. I have absolutely no idea what this means, but I have seen this in reading about lifetime formulas. This is in fact very simple. Again, I'm not a math person, so this is a little bit more my speed. You generally will take the average gift, the average annual donation. You divide that by the attrition rate. And that will give you your average lifetime value of a donor. So in other words, when you say to your boards, okay, we're losing 60% of our donors, you can monetize that to say this comes out to be about X amount that we're losing in lost cash and lost contributions. That tends to get people's attention a little bit more than just numbers of people, because for many organizations and their boards and executive leaders, there's that feeling of, well, we'll just get new donors. We can get more donors to replace the others. But there's so much churn in our sector that we absolutely don't want to be wasting our precious time chasing after churn each and every year. So there are two ways that I would recommend you think about how you build donor retention. It all comes down to how you communicate and the stories you tell to keep those donors inspired. Penelope Burke is a Canadian researcher, and she has spent the last, I'd say, 25 years researching donor motivations. And she's written a few books, Donor-Centered Fundraising, which came out, I think, about 20 years ago, 25 years ago now. And the second edition came out about 2018, where she actually went back and they looked at the organizations that had implemented the recommendations from the first book to see what did it really make a difference? And the short answer is yes. The organizations that really put this reframing of their mindset into practice saw some incredible results. And what she said in her first book, which made me really just stand up and get really worried, was fundraising underperformance is a failure to communicate. Like, so simply, if we're not hitting our goals, or we're not growing and we're kind of stagnant, then there's something in how we're communicating or not communicating that's really it's failing us. And what she found was that donors want three things, and donors of every level want three things when they make a gift. And again, the important piece here is that it's not just donors who are giving large amounts, it's everyday donors who are giving every other amount. They want prompt and meaningful gift acknowledgement. So they want to be thanked. They want to have that question answered of, did you get my gift? They want to designate to something that's restricted to a program or a service or a project, more narrow. Now, I have often interpreted this as wanting to have that designation, not necessarily to restrict it, but to understand where it goes. Okay, so when we give those examples of your gift of $500 can feed, a family of 4 for a month, that is what really motivates them. But I've also seen some other research more recently that has been tracking an increased interest and an increased activity of donors who are designating more frequently to restricted funds. So for this one, this is where I would really put highlights, spotlights, red flags all over this one, because this means that the donors don't understand how our unrestricted gifts, our general operating gifts, are helping our overall impact and results as an organization. So, and we know that unrestricted is absolutely vital to being able to operate, to being able to pay the bills, keep the lights on, do the work. And without the organization's health, the programs and services can't happen. So I would say put a spotlight on this in how you're telling your own stories to your donors, so that they don't feel like sending an unrestricted gift is like putting it into, it's like throwing it into the Grand Canyon. It is in fact still absolutely essential. You could still, of course, offer opportunities for restricted gifts for restricted funds, but I wouldn't do it to the exclusion of unrestricted, which you absolutely need for your core operating expenses. So be careful with this one, because donors want to know, did my gift make a difference? How is my gift going to most make a difference? And make sure that you're messaging that in a way in your reporting back, in your update stories, that will relay that need for understanding, did my gift make a difference? So first question, did you get my gift? Second question, did my gift make a difference? Or how is my gift going to make a difference? Third, they want to know, did my gift make a difference? And donors want to see all three of these. They want to get this little bit of a report back, not necessarily on did my $50 gift, what did you do with my $50 gift specifically, but they want to know how has philanthropy, how have all of us as donors helped to move the needle? And they want to know that before you ask them for another gift. So how do you build in the storytelling and the reporting? Now, I do tend to like to have stats. I like to talk about, how things have changed because for the better, hopefully, as a result of the important work of our nonprofit programs and services in our world. But what I have since learned is that when those stats are brought into conversations or communications with donors, that actually giving drops. So pretty significantly. So that's why we need to balance it by bringing in stories to counter or to even out the numbers. There's a role for numbers for sure and data and those metrics, those sort of percentages of results and growth and so forth. But not only, but you've got to speak in the way that we as human beings really, really most connect, which is through stories. We are hardwired, right? Right from the prehistoric days when we were sitting around the fire telling stories. This is how we most remember the things that are around us. So the way you craft that story can't start with what we do. I can guarantee you that every one of us, when we are talking about an organization that we support or that we work at, we talk about what we do, we talk about how we do it. But again, getting back to neuroscience, why is the thing that's really going to drive us to action. The why statements, why we do what we do, why our gift is important and is going to be used in these different ways. Why our organizations are set up and designed to address the problems you've been set up to address. Those are processed by the part of our brain that makes decisions. Curiously, it is also the part of our brain that controls our emotions. It doesn't make sense to me, but it's the part of the brain that is, in fact, driving our decisions, both decisions and helping us to connect emotionally. So we have to think about when we tell our story. And I completely credit this to Simon Sinek. Check out his book, Start With Why, if you haven't had a chance to read it, or watch his TED Talk. This will help give you a good sense of how to reframe your own stories so that you're starting with that why, that's your lead in. You can still talk about the what and the how, but you got to hook your readers and your audience with the why so we understand that deeper purpose. So there's a balance then to the data and the numbers that tells us what happened, as Nancy Duarte says, but then the stories tell us what that means, right? So there's that balance. So when you're creating your stories and talking about the results and the outcomes that you're achieving, you've got to do this in a way so that it's answering so what, or for the sake of. So you can describe that before and you describe the after, what happened after, because of your organizations and your donor support. The donor has to be kind of that glue between the before and the after. It has to be that link so that they can see by partnering with you and supporting you, there's a correlation. So some life was changed, something happened as a result of the philanthropy and the generosity of your supporters. So that before and after is really important. Share those stories of one. There's lots of psychology research that tells us that when we see things that involve mass people, our immediate reaction is to become numb because we can't figure out how to make sense of it. We can't figure out how to really most impact the something that might have happened and affected many. So, but if you ask me to save the life of, or help feed one child for a week, I can totally understand that. And in fact, I think our brains can't process more than 4 things at a time. So by making it super simple, and that doesn't minimize your bigger mission of who you're serving, but you can do it in a way that's anchored in that story of one. And then finally, leave that story unfinished, because when organizations see all of your incredible stories of success, which is great to celebrate, they're going to say, you know what, they're doing incredible work. I'm going to go to help this other organization that maybe isn't as doing as well. So you want donors to always feel like it's okay to report back and celebrate success because of them, but then your work is still not done, and leave the next story of unfinished so that the donors can say, how else can I help you? You also want to use simple language. So we've just shared, kind of the design of how you tell those stories, but then you want to keep it absolutely simple. Right, for a sixth grade audience, you might just balk and say, that's apps that what our audience is, they're very well educated, they're very well accomplished. Sixth grade, greeting level will feel like it's dumbing it down. Our communications are dumbed down for them. And in fact, that's absolutely not the case, because think about it. We are, I read this recently, we are overwhelmed by 30,000 words a day. So the simpler our language is, it's has to be short. There has to be a lot of white space, has to be simple sentences. We're going to read that quickly because we are skimming. We are very rarely reading in depth. We are skimming stuff when we are reading things. So see, super simple, make it so that it's still impactful but readable, and use videos and pictures. So just like the MemoryFox platform, use those videos as a different way to communicate, because that people are going to be overwhelmed by words and copy. So videos, pictures, they really capture people's attention very differently. And in fact, you can bring people close. You're using a different sense of bringing people visually close to the work that you're doing, to the people whose lives are being changed. So you do this in a number of different ways. I'm going to breeze through this because I want to make sure that we have time for questions, but multi-channel is absolutely the way you need to be thinking about your communication. Um, there are lots of different ways that you can engage and inspire, and these are a few. It goes from the sort of broader opportunities to ask for feedback, for invitation to events, to thank you calls, or in person or video updates from your CEO. You could do this quarterly. You can do it once a year. You could do it a couple times a year. One-on-one visits, both by staff and with board. There are a lot of different ways that you can connect, but do you see here that there are different event types, there are different ways of connecting, so that they're, not just one-on-ones, they're not just one-way conversations where it's e-blasts or videos out, but there's a way to create a dialogue with your donors. Now, boards, I want to just put a little pin here, because boards do play an important role in this. In Penelope's research, she asked that question of, if you received a thank you call from a donor, from a board member within days of making your gift, how would it make you feel? 93% said they would give again. 84% thought they might give a larger gift, and 74% said they'd continue to give indefinitely. The point here is, whether or not these numbers are in fact true to what people will actually do, because there's always a variance. The reality is that people feel seen and they feel valued when they get a call from a board member, because in fact, they view board members as really important. They view board members as very busy. And the fact that they've taken the time to say thank you, to reach out again, even if it's a voicemail, which will most likely be the case, it sends an important signal. So if you do nothing else to start to move and rethink your strategies for building stronger donor relationships, do this, because this is a great way for board members to get involved. It is not asking, it's saying thank you. You give them a script and you can make it super easy and turnkey for them so that they feel connected to their donors. Um, So, okay, so that's one way to strategize, and then you want to really think about who your donors are. So I just suggest these as your current donors, your new donors, and your lapsed donors, the ones who you want to try to get back. Um, there are lots of different ways that your CRMs can segment to make this more personalized. The point here is you want to be able to focus your time where you have the best ROI. So if you can do this in a way that's that's seeing the donor for who they are, what they who and what they support and ways they support, then you can segment it so that it isn't just a spray and pray approach. It's a little bit more customized. It's reflective of the donors and maybe how long they've been supporting you or what programs they've designated to, or the amount of money that they've given. So, these are ways to prioritize. Also, talk to your donors. Where you can have one-on-one conversations, yes, absolutely. But I recognize you're not going to have the time because you're probably wearing all the hats. So you may not have the time to have all those conversations, but send out surveys to ask, tell us a little bit more about why you chose to support, make a gift to us this year. We'd love to learn what your story is. Or you might have a pop-up that comes on when they've made an online contribution to ask, how was this giving experience? Tell us how we might improve this page. Again, how many times do we get little pop-ups or things in our email saying, hey, will you take the survey? For this, you do want to understand, were there any friction points in the online donation page that you need to fix so that people will be able to make their gift. If your online platform, your online donation page and backend is set up so that you can circle back with those who have abandoned their cart, so to speak, so who maybe started the online donation page and then abandoned it, stopped it, that's great to be able to remind them, hey, you left that gift in the cart. We'd love to make sure that that goes to, that has some impact in changing lives, just reminding them. And then you could ask them, what do you expect as a donor? How often would you like to hear from us? Or would you like to be invited to see the work in action, kind of thing? Those sorts of questions. Doesn't have to be extensive, but sharing and asking for that feedback will be really important. I've been talking about the abysmal retention of first-time donors. And I will say that this is where you really also want to be focusing attention. There's a cadence of communication touch points that you want to ensure is going out to those first-time supporters so that they feel valued and seen, right? Going back to that first question, did you get my gift? Is it going to do any good? Within the first 48 hours, as you're able to have somebody call and thank them. Again, they're not going to probably pick up the phone, but that voicemail is going to be important. And then over the course of the next 45 to 90 days, make sure that you are inviting them to things, you're sending them materials, and I would say go old school and send them some print pieces. It could be newsletters, it could be a collage of photos from your work. It could be a handwritten note, like old school handwritten with ink pen sort of thing. The point is that you want to ensure that they have different ways to learn about you as an organization. Certainly, you can convert this into an automated email series that goes out to first-time supporters. So maybe once a week or once every week and a half, they're getting a thank you, they're getting a highlight about one of your programs, they're getting, again, maybe you're upcycling some other materials that you've created. Again, I'm not suggesting creating a whole new communication strategy here. Definitely upcycle things that you've created from your newsletters or other materials that you can then repurpose for this donor stewardship. And then figure out who your donors are who have lapsed. This is important. So while we're tracking who has stuck around, you want to understand who has stopped giving, and maybe they were one-time donors, and is there something you can do to reconnect with them? Were there monthly donors who stopped giving? And I can't tell you how many monthly contributions I've stopped and I've never heard from the organization again. So nobody's paying attention to this. longtime donors, if they've stopped, this is worth sending a note to them or calling them, especially if you might know who they are. They might have just simply forgotten. Maybe they've overlooked your solicitations. Maybe there was something else going on that you weren't aware of. These are the questions you want to really understand. I like that doing something in you can do this as sort of as a mass email that goes out to them, but something that's along the lines of, hey, we miss you, or you could be a little bit more playful, say, was it something we said? But something that really kind of gets their attention and asks, we've missed seeing you as a supporter and champion of our work. We'd love to learn a little bit more about why, um, what's been going on, why, and how can we re-engage with you. Besides doing the cleaning of your CRM of your data file, by running it through NCOA or disease suppression, these other touch points are going to be important. So this has been sort of a high level overview of how you really build that donor engagement and communication strategy to more deeply connect with your donors so they stick around. There's part kind of the science of understanding why donors give and why they stop giving, but there's also the discipline of ensuring that your donor communications are structured in a way, have a cadence and have the content so that they're really telling your story, they're connecting and telling the donors how their gifts are being put to work. And you've got your why, and you understand what their why is. And then we've got the back end of segmenting and ensuring that we are really nudging our donors to consider upgrading or feeling like they can do other things to more deeply support your programs. Um, there's a lot more that you can learn on our website. And then lots of different ways to stay connected. If you are interested in a mastermind coaching cohort that we're going to be launching, scan this to get on the wait list when we've got the dates lined up. We'll make sure we let you know. And then, of course, lots of different ways to connect and follow me and Windmill Hill as a firm on all the social platforms, except for Facebook, because I'm not there. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and see, Carly, what questions we might have.
Wow, I love that. And actually, I'll have you send me those links and then I can put them in the follow-up email too, so then everybody can sign up to receive correspondence from you and get on that wait list and stuff like that. So that
Perfect.
would be great. We'll definitely do that. Okay, I have some questions. So first question comes from Nelson. Nelson asked, do you have any specific advice for organizations that are losing donors due to a change in leadership?
Yeah. Yeah. And I've been there, Nelson. I was at the American Red Cross when we right after the South Asian tsunami and during Katrina. And then we went through three CEO transitions, which were quite visible. They were in all the news. And it was not in our shining a favorable light on us. And what I can say from that experience and from other experiences I've had with working with clients, the most important thing is keeping those lines of communication open. So making sure, first of all, that your donors don't hear about the leadership transition from any other source but you. Making sure it's clear what steps you've put into place to ensure continuity of your work in the absence of that leader or during this leadership transition. Um, there might be there might be some questions that your donors might have, and so understanding what those are and being able to speak to those is going to be essential as well. So I think there's that piece of it, the kind of the mitigating any of the negative perception. But there's also then when you get the new leadership in place, having a plan that ensures that CEO, that new leader, is going to get out and meet with your core donors. So you could do this through large and small events. You can do this through video. Something like this would be great, where you're inviting all of your donors and past donors and all stakeholders to meet the new CEO. You could do one-on-ones, and that's where you want to tier it because there's only so many hours in the day. But there's a before and after plan that has to be in place, and if you are not quite in a leadership transition yet, I'm hoping not, doing in the quieter time, this is the moment to plan it so that you've got, at least you can make tweaks when it's happening. But it's ensuring that you've got that continuity of operations, and then you're reassuring your donors, especially, that the work is still going to continue, that their partnership is still important in light of the stuff that's happening, because they do want to know, is your organization okay? Is it still going to be able to deliver the results that you were set out to do? And what's going to happen with the new leadership? How is that going to change things? And you have to reassure them to the answer to those questions.
Oh, I love that, especially because I think a lot of times when you do get a new leader, maybe if it's, right at the top, maybe it's the CEO, or a new board chair or something, there might be some initiative that they're planning to expand or something else they're planning to implement. So just
Yeah.
being like really forward about, hey, now that we have this in place, here's our big plan that we're hoping to do, and you can be a part of it. That would be really cool.
That's exactly right. And the other thing you want to be keeping an eye on for is that there are there are personal connections to the CEO. So if you know in advance or a leader is leaving, is to really understand what are those relationships that are personal that might go with that leader, so that you can try to mitigate that loss of donors or partners. And the same with, if you know in advance, and they can try to make intros so that there's a smoother handoff to other staff members as well.
Oh, that's such a good point. Like, even if someone is retiring, like maybe they
Yes.
could take some time to reach out to, like, especially the major donors that they've probably stewarded for 10 years. We want you to stay with us, and we
Yeah,
hope that you'll still believe in our mission after, after I decide to go retire. That's a really
exactly.
good point.
Exactly.
Okay, one question I had. So you talked about the 43% is the retention rate right now, and you gave the example of if an organization can even increase it to 53%, how much more that would be.
Yeah.
And that got me thinking, 100% would be an unreachable,
Yeah.
an amount that's unreachable. But do you have maybe an amount, a goal that you think nonprofits should shoot for?
Well, certainly above 50% for sure, right? And I would say I'd like to see organizations that are in the 70%. I have seen that once, maybe, right? So we have a long way to go. I sometimes will see this in universities where there might be participation rates, which are very, very high, and then likelihood the retention is probably maybe a little bit lower, but still pretty high. So I would say look to see if you can get whatever your starting point is, because again, for some who've got 20%, 30%, 40% retention, 70 might seem really out of reach. But look at whatever your starting point is and say, okay, what would be a 2% growth, or how many more donors would we have to keep? What would be a 5% growth? And then figure it out what makes sense from the math perspective, so that
Yeah.
you can manage your limited staff bandwidth to focus on keeping donors that are realistic, and a few more donors that are realistic. So and not overwhelming your already overstretched team.
I think that's such a good point too, because like you're saying, like success really can mean something totally different depending on where you work, or how much time you're able to spend on focusing on stuff like this. And I think sometimes it can feel like if we don't hit a 90%, or if we don't hit 100, then we haven't done anything. And
Yeah,
maybe it's okay to just make sure that you increase it by 5% this year, and maybe next year it's 10%, and so on and so forth. And even when you have your annual board meeting, you say, hey, here's how much more money we raised because of it, and we saved this much money because we weren't spending as much on, getting new donors. I think that's so important.
exactly. And that's how you tell your story behind the scenes, around not just hitting your goal or not hitting your goal, but what does it mean for the donor file, the health of the donor file? Because if you are hitting your goal each and every year, but you have very low retention, that's a lot of hard work that you're investing that isn't going to be scalable over time. So the donors who are going to become your large gift donors or your transformational donors, or those who are going to leave your organization in their wills, are the ones who are giving year over year over year. And if you can't hold on to them, ultimately you're just making things so much more difficult for your organization.
Okay, I have another question. So you also mentioned things, you talked about lapsed donors as well. So maybe that's somebody who didn't give it the previous year, but this year, but they gave the previous year, or, maybe even 2 years ago.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have an answer for this, but at what point do we actually let those donors go? Is it 5 years? Is it 10 years? I mean, when do we decide, okay, they just don't want to support us and that's okay?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I would say from the research I've seen and studies I've seen, generally it's like after 3 years, the reactivation rate is below 5%.
Oh, okay.
So I would say 3 is probably one cutoff. But in the if you and for print pieces, for print especially, because that's it's going to be costly, right, for the number of pieces you're mailing. I would go no further than 3 years for those lapsed donors, those inactive donors. But you can go for electronic. I would go as far back
Right.
as
It
you
doesn't
want.
cost anymore,
It
right?
doesn't cost anymore. And the real again, because of all the reasons, sometimes people may not even realize they've stopped giving. So you could, for your electronic communications, keep as many as you want in there. And then for the print, I wouldn't go back more than probably 3 years, because that return of the cost is not going to be as significant.
Oh, I love that answer. I hope somebody wrote that down and they're gonna implement that because that's such a good tidbit. I love that. Well, that is all the questions I have for you today. Thank you so much for joining us. I saw a lot of people writing that they took a lot of notes, so that's really great that some people are hopefully going to implement stuff immediately. Like I said, or to everyone who is here, I'm gonna send out the recording afterwards, and I'll send out any of those resources that you'd like me to share as well, Barbara. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank
And I will now just let everyone know we will be concluding the webinar, but if anybody would like to stick around and learn a little bit more about MemoryFox, I am going to hop into showing just a short demo of MemoryFox right now. So I'm going to go ahead and say goodbye to Barbara. Thank you for coming.
Thanks,
Thank you for
Charlie.
joining us.
Thanks, everyone.
And I'll share my screen here. Okay, so if you don't know anything about MemoryFox, that's okay. I'd love to give you a short overview. Um, and this works really well with what Barbara was talking about today about being able to share your story instead of just those impact numbers. Because the way I always like to start off talking about MemoryFox is just saying, hey, if someone asks you what is your mission, are you able to show them? And chances are you are able to recite your mission like the back of your hand. You've probably said it 1,000 times. You probably typed it 1,000 times. But are you really able to show them with powerful videos and photos? And my next question would be, if you don't feel like you are able to currently show your mission in action, then what's stopping you? And the thing is, when we talk to nonprofit professionals, we find that there are often 3 barriers that come along with collecting and organizing and sharing videos and photos. And number 1 would be that the actual collecting process can feel like pulling teeth, like you're asking your community and you just don't get anything in return. Number 2, organizing the content can be frustrating and very time consuming. And then third, in terms of the actual sharing, a lot of nonprofits just feel like they need a more efficient, modern way to share their story. And the good news is we actually created a platform that does exactly that. We have a collect, organize, and share system, and I'll just share a little bit about each of those. The first step is the collection process. So what we do is we help you create a campaign that you're going to send directly to your storyteller. So directly to the person that you want to collect the story from. That could be the person who participates in your programs, could be your donors, could be your board members, could be your staff members, could be anybody really. There's tons of stories at your fingertips. You can actually test it out for yourself if you want to scan that QR code and see what it would be like to be the storyteller that receives a campaign. But the cool thing about the way we collect stories or help you collect stories is that there's no download or login required. And we also capture the contact info and the consent up front for you all. So you absolutely know you can use the story. And finally, at the very end, after someone submits a photo or video, it will redirect back to your website. So it's gonna just kind of seem like it's your own brand. Next, in terms of organizing, we help when somebody submits a story to your MemoryFox campaign, it's going to automatically populate at the top of your MemoryFox story bank. So this is an example of a MemoryFox story bank, and this is how it would look on your side as the organization. So we help you keep really organized because you are able to tag your content. Maybe you want to tag it by program, event, department, how you plan to use it. You also are able to bulk upload all your existing content. So you have folders on your computer. You can put them in your story bank, which is going to work out really well because then more people will have access to them. And then finally, you can enjoy unlimited storage, which is something that we offer to all of our customers. And then in terms of sharing, we have a lot of tools that help you make sure that you actually can share your photos, videos, written testimonials after you've collected them. So first of all, as you can see in this graphic here, we are integrated with Canva, which means that when you collect photos, videos directly from your community through the app, through the campaign, it's going to automatically populate into Canva. So you can see here, you can just drag and drop it into any of your pre-existing designs. You can make sure that it's branded to your organization, download it like you normally would. Next, we also have a video editor, so you can use that to combine and edit your clips. You can trim things, you can put things together. That's a really helpful way to make those short form videos that you need for social media. We also have a story builder, which is a great way to share several stories in one web page. You can embed that in your website, or you can send the link directly to your donors, directly to your board members, directly to your foundations, whoever you might need to see those impact stories in action. And the final thing that we do to help you with sharing is that at all times, you will have the high quality original submission that you're able to download. So I know for me, when I used to work at a nonprofit, people would send me photos and videos to my email or through to my phone through a text message, and they would show up in a way that I couldn't actually use them. Maybe it was in a thumbnail, maybe it was in a low quality version that I wouldn't actually be able to share it. When you use MemoryFox, it's actually going to overcome all of those types of obstacles. Okay, so that was just a quick little overview of what we do here at MemoryFox. If anybody's interested in learning more, I invite you to go ahead and book a time with one of our expert storytellers. Just finally want to wrap it up because a lot of people, I'm sure you want to know, well, how much does this thing cost? We do equitable pricing, so it is based on your $9.90 and a few other factors that we take into play. That because we do actually believe that you all have great stories to tell, and we want to make sure everybody has the ability to do so. Okay, thank you all for sticking around, and thank you all for joining us today. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.